Well, good evening. I'm Evan Dawson, host of WXXI's Connections, and glad to be with you tonight. We have a really remarkable hour of conversation about a documentary and, frankly, about so much more in our community. Of course, the film is The Reason I Jump, and my guess is if you're joining us tonight, you've seen it. But in a moment, if you haven't, we're going to get you a chance to see the trailer so you know exactly what it's about. Part of the reason we're here tonight is because we have such wonderful partners who have been with not only WXXI, but this community through thick and thin, through the pandemic. Here we are in the comfort of our own spaces, but still bringing you world-class programming through the Little Theater. Our thanks to the whole team at the Little, the Al Siegel community of agencies, the Golisano Foundation, and the Golisano Autism Center. And if you haven't seen the film, this is a chance now to take a look at the trailer for The Reason I Jump.
Can you imagine how your life would be if you couldn't say what you wanted?
Naoki Higashida makes a map of his mind. It's kind of poetry.
How do I see the world? For me, the details jump straight out. Inside my head, there isn't really such a big difference between what I was told just now and what I heard a long time ago. My mind is forever swaying this way and that.
I've tried to stop her from being herself.
I think we can change the conversation around autism by being part of the conversation.
Right now, Joss is having a joy that I will never come close to.
To live my life as a human being, nothing is more important than being able to express myself.
Well, in a moment, you're going to meet the documentary filmmaker and director of The Reason I Jump. But before we do that, I want to bring in Tom O'Connor, who is the president of the Al Siegel community of agencies, for a few words. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Evan, and thank you. Howdy, neighbors, and welcome, everyone. I know that this isn't the way we intended to do this year's Dialogue on Disability, but I am grateful that we can still be connected and have such a terrific group of friends gathered. The Reason I Jump, another stellar addition to the Dialogue on Disability series. Jerry, this is a visually stunning film with an artist's use of audio, creating a gorgeous example of storytelling while providing insight into a world of abilities that we are all still learning about. Thank you for creating this. Ben states in the film, and I'm not giving anything away here for anybody who hasn't seen it, it was just in the trailer, I think we can change the conversation around autism by being part of the conversation. And that is precisely the thinking behind Dialogue on Disability. Since 2003, WXXI and the Al Siegel community of agencies have worked together to help break the ingrained stereotypes about individuals with intellectual and physical disabilities with this week-long initiative, Dialogue on Disability. Held every January in weather just like we're having tonight, this initiative is designed to stimulate community dialogue about the perspectives and abilities of people with physical and intellectual disabilities and move us closer to a world of inclusion. Dialogue on Disability is a partnership between WXXI and Al Siegel Community of Agencies in conjunction with the Herman and Margaret Schwartz Community Series. Dialogue on Disability is supported by the Fred L. Emerson Foundation with additional support from the Golisano Foundation. And personally, I want to thank Tom Golisano, Ann Costello, and the Golisano Foundation for all they do to make our community, actually our world, a better place, and our friends at WXXI for bringing us all together. Thanks, stay healthy, and enjoy the Q&A tonight.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate that and everything that you and the team do. I want to bring in Jerry Rothwell, who is the documentary filmmaker and director of The Reason I Jump. It is an honor to have you, sir. And in a brief way of introduction, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to this project and really how you see the mission of this film?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I first came across the book from Stevie and Jeremy, who you meet in the film, who are the parents of Joss and the producers of the film. And they got in touch with the producer I usually work with, and were interested in kind of me making a film around it. And I guess my first step obviously was to read the book. I was totally blown away by it, as a lot of people have been, and really wanted to meet Naoki. I guess my first idea for a film was one that was about Naoki. I went to Japan, talked to him about it, which is an extraordinary experience, actually being with Naoki as he's writing and communicating. He's now 26. I think he was 12 when he wrote the book. And he was very happy for the project to go ahead, but didn't want to be in the film. So that kind of left me with an interesting creative problem, which we can talk about later. But I mean, in terms of the mission of it, I guess for me, the experience of reading the book was to take you into an experience of the world that I can touch on in parts, bits of it are familiar and bits aren't, and to get you to kind of see the world through somebody else's eyes. And I think that's what the book does. So I guess we were trying to make a cinematic equivalent of the book.
It is such an extraordinary film that it sent me sort of down a little research rabbit hole to go back to 2013 when the book first came out and try to, I missed some of these stories somehow. And it happens to all of us. And, interestingly enough, Jerry, I was reading some of the criticism, essay criticism. The book was remarkably well received, but there were some critics who questioned whether could this book have really been written without the help of a parent? Was this a parent's interpretation? And in a way, your film seems to almost put that doubt to rest, because when we see Ben and Emma, when Ben writes that Emma is his North Star, or she is badass, the way the emotional depth of him describing that relationship. When we see the people in this film, the way they're communicating, in a way, for me, that seems to put to rest any question about whether that original book could have been written by the author. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, and for me, visiting and meeting Naoki was part of putting that to rest. I didn't want to make a film if there was any doubt that, the book was authentic. But Naoki, as I say, he still uses pointing to a letterboard as his main means of communication, although he also types it independently at a computer, and he does both of those things without any of the kind of physical support that was very controversial in the 90s as a communication method. So he doesn't use facilitated communication, which is where a lot of this controversy began. And he's every bit as kind of wise and poetic as you would think from the book. There was one point in the conversation, I mean, he's also subject to the same distractions as a lot of non-speaking autistic people are. So, you would ask a question, he would type a few words, point to a few words, get up, go and look out the window, talk about the fire escape, come back, sit down, type 3 more words, get up again, look at the window. And at one point I asked him, what is it that draws you to the window all the time? And he said, he typed out, I'm looking at car wheels rotating. I said, why is that? And he said, they're like, I'm looking at car wheels, he said. And then I said, why that? He said, they're like galaxies rotating. And I just thought this is kind of like this incredibly poetic mind. And you can tell that from the book, I think,
Yeah, no question about it. Let me bring in Clara Washington. Clara is in Rochester and the parent of a 10-year-old girl. And Clara, first of all, welcome. Thank you for being with us, and tell us a little bit about your family.
I have 2 children. I have a 20-year-old and I have a 10-year-old. I have a 20-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter. She is autistic. She's partially nonverbal, and she struggles. She has the same struggles as the children and the young people in this movie.
when did you come to, sort of a way of understanding your daughter, either with a diagnosis of autism or understanding what it meant to have a child who's partially nonverbal, Clara?
As far I can speak to the partially nonverbal, it took a long time. It took an extremely long time, and I just with her being out of school for almost 10 months, I got like a real awakening on some things, and she's 10 years old, and I'm still getting an awakening on how she communicates, and like I'll think about things that happened back to her in the past, and then I think about like how she was trying to communicate and how she would fall out and she would jerk herself and just hit herself, and she was struggling. And I think about those and how far she's come and how far I've come to understand. And so it's just an awakening that's constantly happening, and getting the understanding. And we've gotten to a point now where I feel like she's safe, and the people that she's around is safe too. And so she doesn't have those certain behaviors like she had before, because I feel like she didn't feel safe that people could understand what was going on with her and what she needed. So then she would just act out.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of the film, Clara?
I thought it was amazing. I was like swallowing so hard through everything, because it just really connected with me. And I just wish that everyone, my family members, my friends who have this peculiar look sometimes when they see or not, just peculiar look that anyone would have, like I would have if I didn't have an autistic child, could see this and understand, especially the nonverbal children, the ones who can't just communicate what they're feeling, because we've had so many situations, even with people who are specialists, who do not understand how a child with autism communicates that's partially nonverbal or who is completely nonverbal.
Yeah, Clara, I'm thinking about some of the emotions I felt watching the film, and I wonder, you kind of just described some of the ways that the film hit you as a parent.
Yes.
And the way that you want your family and friends to see this film so they can sort of digest some of the themes here. For me, there's a couple of things that jump right to mind, and I'm curious to know how you feel about it. First of all, on the sort of the realm of how the world, frankly, has interacted with people who are neurodivergent, you have the heartbreaking, and in Sierra Leone we saw, parents talking about being told to essentially kill their own children.
Yes.
If
Mm-hmm.
Not neurotypical. I mean, just the heartbreak, and of course we know many decades, if not centuries, of frankly tragedies just like that. So that's on one end, but then maybe on the other end, you have well-intending people who may
Yes.
meet children who are nonverbal, partially nonverbal, and sort of infantilize the experience because, they think, well, this person is not able to process thoughts, emotions, complex ideas, which of course is not true. But can you talk to me a little bit about the challenge of wanting to have people understand your daughter better and not just infantilize, if that makes sense?
Yes. So I feel like it's a struggle because she always needs processing time, and I have definite compassion and understanding for other people because of how long it took me to understand how much time she needs. Mm-hmm. And now I know that, and then now I can reiterate that, like, she will say hi to you, just give her a second, and she will tell you what she wants, but she just needs a second. So I feel like I'm kind of interpreting for her, but because she just needs that processing time, and she will tell you, like, verbally if she wants something. If she doesn't, she'll push her hand away. She has her way to show what she wants, but it can be frustrating. But like, one of the parents were saying, like, what happens when we're not here, and the safety, and so she's 10 now, she's going to get bigger. Who is going to be that person, if I'm not there? And so that's just the scary part. I'm hoping I'm answering your question.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Jerry, can you just share some thoughts about that theme as well? the desire that maybe even well-intending people have to be kind, but not realizing that if you infantilize, you're actually taking away someone's capacity to maybe hear you and be heard. Hold on, Jerry, you're still on mute. It is still.
I think what Clara said about I think it's Jeremy in the film that says, what happens when I'm not there? That's something I heard from all of the parents, I think. I think that's just a really present thought for all of the parents who are kind of amazing. I was so blown away by their kind of, who they are, who they've become. I think, Naoki in the book says, communication is everything. And I think when you see Ben and Emma communicate in the film, you understand what that opens up for them. They're doing kind of lessons about Argentinian politics, or they're ultimately moving into a flat on their own. And they couldn't have done either of those things without the ability to communicate and without being able to express that in some way. So that kind of focus on how empowering that is, and how much attention in early years needs to be around a community's ability to understand and listen, and it's so critical, I think.
Yeah, Jerry, I think it was a couple of years ago on our talk show that someone made the point that, well, just because you're not institutionalizing us anymore, or at least not in the numbers that the world used to, doesn't mean that inclusion is happening, doesn't mean that understanding is happening. And when I saw Ben and Emma, as you say, engaging in a classroom lesson in Argentina, and I think they said these are among the first lessons they've ever done. And Ben, I think that's when Ben says, we haven't had our civil rights.
Yes.
If I'm connecting that moment, is that when Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that, he says, the denial of education is the denial of your civil rights.
Yeah, indeed. So, well, let me bring in the Milkos now. And Sarah Milko is someone who the Rochester community knows well through her work in the autism community. And of course, I know well through connections, but this is a welcome to you and some family. So Sarah, can you do some introductions yourself and Teddy?
Hi, sure. I'm Sarah Milko, as Evan said. Thanks so much for having us. And Jerry, thanks so much for doing this film. We loved it. Teddy and I watched it together, and we sat still for the whole hour and 22 minutes, and we're really mesmerized by it. So thank you.
And Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about the work you've done in the community, and then we'll talk about family life.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm the executive director of Autism Up, which is a local organization started by parents 16 years ago. I'm very fortunate that I have turned my passion into my profession. I work with a group of moms. We all started this organization together many, many years ago, really out of the need to fill in the gaps for our kids in our society, really based around social and recreational needs that when our kids were 4 and 5 years old, we just weren't finding the programs that we knew they needed. And here we are 16 years later, and recently moved into the Golisano Autism Center and partnered with Al Siegel and CP Rochester to bring that center to our community. So we feel very, very fortunate to be part of this community and to be able to provide these type of opportunities for families living with autism.
Oh, Evan, you're mute now.
Oh yeah, you muted, Evan. Here, sit up.
It's 2021, everyone, and we're going to figure this out eventually. So let me say then, I want to welcome Teddy as well. And Teddy, it's an honor to have you. I'll start by asking you, Teddy, what did you like about the film? Now, Teddy can go ahead and is going to give us an answer. And Sarah, tell us a little bit about communication with Teddy.
Sure. So Teddy has autism and was also diagnosed with verbal apraxia at about 3 or 4 years old. And really, since that point, has been focused on, many, many years of speech therapy. But I want to say really in the last 5 years or so, Teddy has started to show us how he wanted to communicate. And he does so by by typing and using an assistive tech device. So Teddy, you want to answer Evan's question? Tell him what you liked about the movie. Go ahead.
I like the story about Ben and Emma.
Yeah. Wait. There you go. Yep. And tell Evan and the listeners what you liked about it. Why did you like that? Yep.
They communicate like me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was a good movie, and I hope it opens people's minds.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jerry, are you hearing a lot of that already, Jerry?
Yeah, but it's lovely to hear that, Teddy, that it kind of resonated with you. Yeah. Yeah, it's been a really great response to it. I mean, I think when we kind of finished it, it's a strange film. It has no story, there's no kind of driving plot, but it does seem to immerse people and, carry them forward through take them on a journey, I guess. And it's great that we're getting those responses.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to ask Teddy as well about communication. And Teddy, this is a film that shows us different ways of communicating, and frankly, for neurotypical people to be much more open to learning how to communicate and to communicate better. Teddy, what is something you wish adults or frankly, people everywhere would know to better communicate with you?
People need to be open to different ways of communication.
Okay. Yeah. Look. Mm-hmm.
Just because talking is hard for me doesn't mean I don't understand.
Yeah. Good.
Sarah, can I ask you to elaborate on that? Oh, I don't want to interrupt him.
Just because of my challenges with
Sure.
speech.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard that. He was kind of jumping ahead. Here, go ahead. Say that again. Yep.
It's hard when people assume things just because of my challenges with speech.
Yeah. So Teddy's just saying, I think for both of us, one of our biggest frustrations has been when people assume because of Teddy's verbal challenges that he doesn't understand. And, now that he's older, sometimes we'll look at each other, he'll just kind of roll his eyes at me, because people who are just meeting him, they'll either talk really loud or they'll just look to me and they won't talk directly to him. And they assume he doesn't understand or he isn't aware. And that's really frustrating. So I think when we were watching the film together last night, and when Ben and Emma came on and Teddy used a letterboard very similar to what they were using, and he was so psyched to see that. It was like, hey, they're like me, so that was really inspiring.
Yeah, and if you could, Sarah, let me just ask you, and if Teddy wants to weigh in, I want him to have time to do that as well, Teddy, if you want to, and I'd love to hear from Jerry on this as well. I understand, and Sarah, we've said many times on the show that if you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism, and that there is a danger to overgeneralize it. So what I'm trying to take away from this film is not to overgeneralize, but also to still, to, in a sense, one of the, if I'm going to make a generalization, it's that I am not going to assume anything about someone's, sort of mental capacity, intellectual capacity, just based on how they're verbally or not verbally communicating. And that has been so, I think, powerful to me to see just the depth of the intellect and the emotion and the experience that sometimes just cannot come out verbally. So I guess I'm asking, do I have permission to generalize on that, given all of our conversations?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think the element of autism that a lot of people don't understand is, at its core, it's a motor planning disorder. And for those who don't understand what motor planning is, that's your ability to have your body do what your brain is telling you to do. There's a neurological disconnect there. So to be able to understand, but not be able to move your mouth or even your body the way your brain is telling you is seems to be a common theme for a lot of people who are diagnosed with autism. So I think in many ways it's okay to make that minor generalization,
Sure.
although everybody is unique and an individual. That seems to be a big challenge and something that's common among so many individuals on the spectrum.
Yeah, and Jerry, there's a moment, and I if I'm remembering, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's when the narrator is reading from the book text, in which the author is saying that we need to be careful about overreacting to a person with autism, maybe fixating on one word. And because sometimes if it's one word that continues to be repeated, people around that person will assume that they're actually trying to say something about whether it's a color or an animal or something, as opposed to just not being able to bring out the words and the ideas, but then not, we get sort of sidetracked by one word or an idea. Am I remembering that correct? I think that was from the book.
I think there's two places in the film, I think, where that happens. One is, as you say, from the book, where Naoki says something like, communication isn't the same as sounds coming out of your mouth, and the other is that sort of fantastic sort of bat and ball game that Joss plays with Red Hoover, Black Hoover, with his support workers. I mean, I think it was in make the question of sort of generalization. There was always a bit of a danger in the film of like, because you had these readings from the book, that they, that the book was assumed to speak for all nonverbal autistic people, which is why we kind of ended up trying to find a place for the book through this journey of this young boy who kind of is about the same age as Naoki was when he wrote the book, to kind of sort of separate the book out a bit from some of the people that we meet. And as you say, they're all really different from each other, and hopefully it kind of builds up a picture of as you say, like a constellation of different people.
Mm-hmm. So Sarah and Clara and Teddy, when we think about communication, Sarah, you mentioned years of, I think, speech therapy. Is that right?
Yep.
So what is sort of the mindset you have as a parent that goes from thinking, okay, we're going to work hard on speech therapy with a goal of X, as opposed to, okay, that is not as important as understanding this is how Teddy communicates and this is how our family's going to communicate, and we're going to do it that way.
Yeah, and that that took a long time, I think, for our family to really come to that realization. We Ted is a hard worker. He worked so hard and wanted that speech element so much. And I think probably maybe Teddy, when you were 6 or 7, and we started to realize, what, Ted's a great communicator and speech isn't everything. And as soon as we started to come to that realization, right? I know, yeah. Then we all got on board with that, and it made it a lot easier to look at alternative ways. And I'm still kind of taken back as a parent when someone will say to me, "Oh, he's nonverbal," and I think, well, yeah, but he's a great communicator, and that's really everything.
Clara, can you weigh in on that as well? Just sort of how you see your daughter's 10.
Yes.
So, what your maybe your hopes and your expectations are for how you and she communicate, how she will communicate with others.
My initial hope was everything was just going to connect, and then she was just going to just start talking in full sentences, and we were going to have conversations. And as the time goes by, I still have dreams of her doing that. I still wake up, I literally have dreams of her, just us having conversations. We don't have conversations right now. So I just have to go by what she can do and it varies it always varies. She could be right on target, and she's starting to be right on target, but and then sometimes she just doesn't even want to say anything. And then she'll just want to move your hand to what she wants or something like that. So it's tough, and she has had speech therapy from basically since she was a baby. And I want her to be able to communicate regardless if it's verbal. I want her to be able to communicate. And that's like my hope is for her to have the resources available, because, I see others with a lot of resources, and that she could get, but I don't, but there's things, finances that are hindering it, and like the system that we have now in the city school district, and that she can't get no more than what she's getting unless I come out of pocket and pay for it. And it's just a lot. And I feel like if she had more resources and more help, she would be a little bit further than where she is right now. So that's a struggle, a constant struggle for me, and I believe for her also.
I want to let our viewing audience know that we will have time if people want to submit any questions or comments for this panel about this remarkable film. And coming up here, I do want to hear from the filmmaker about just the process of creating this film, because anybody who's created a documentary film or even heard from documentary filmmakers knows that there are always moments or elements that you have to edit out. And this is a powerful 80 minutes. There are so many moments in there that feel like they will stay with me permanently. And I want to hear from Jerry in a moment about maybe that process of the moments that we did see on film and how that came together. Claire, but can I also ask you, I want to hear from Teddy in a moment about his job. Teddy's working. When you think about your daughter's future, have you thought much about that down the road? I mean, I thought this film was really poignant too, in talking about independence, looking at Ben's story and seeing what those steps look like. Tell me about your thoughts about your daughter in that.
I see a lot, like she likes to, like, for things to be in order. She won't let things, like, she won't walk away unless something is shut. And I feel like if we in my community, as much as I can veer her towards and to single out what she's good at and can see things, because people see things, like her schools may see something different than I see. And then, like, if we are a team, maybe we can like veer her towards something. And I do see her with a job. I definitely see her doing a job. And I just have a like big hopes for her, and I do see her working, but I think she needs to get everything she needs to do what she has in her mind and what she has in her heart.
Teddy, can I ask you about work? I understand you're working. Can you tell me about work?
I work at the Strong Museum at the library. I am part of the SELF program at Strong Museum.
So Ted works at Strong Museum, as he just said, and it's part of a transition-based program that Autism Up started in collaboration with BOCES One and the Strong Museum and with ARC, actually. And it gives work-based internships for kids who are getting ready to exit the school-based program, kids 18 to 21. So Ted will finish up with that in May when you turn 21, right? And then next we're hoping Ted can take those skills and through another new program we're starting at Autism Up called My Full Life Academy. We're helping young adults really refine work skills and want to help them after age 21, because as we all know, learning and growing doesn't stop at age 21, but school supports do at age 21. So, right? So that's what's next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's been a poignant subject that we've discussed on Connections a number of times. It comes up in the film, and Jerry, as we were mentioning, I can't imagine what you had to edit out here. What was the process like for you? I mean, there were certain moments in this film where, for example, I think it's Amrit's mother who was saying at one moment that when they would be out in public together, Amrit, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Jerry, she would have certain things that she would obsess about, and her mother says that she used to try to stop her from doing that because she was worried it would look socially awkward. And then she realized over time, she says, I'm trying to stop her from being who she actually is, and she's breaking down in tears. And these are things that I will probably never forget thanks to this film. I can't even imagine what you had to edit out as a filmmaker, Jerry.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the most sort of improvisational film I've ever made, in the sense it was very much just kind of being with people for a period of time. And, we would follow kind of what they were doing for that day, or they'd come up with some ideas of things we could shoot. You know, they had an ice hockey practice, or they were going to the market, or whatever. I guess what we tried to do is just have a very particular method about the way that we filmed, you know, so that, you know, both from Naoki's book and from this kind of incredible literature that's being written by non-speaking autistic writers, you know, that it's not just Naoki, there are a whole set of people that are writing books which have lots of similar touch points around the kind of sensory world that they experience or they're describing. And so we sort of, and there was a thing in Naoki's, in The Reason I Jump in the book, where Naoki says, you know, I see detail and get immersed in detail before I see the big picture. And we sort of decided, okay, well, let's approach, rather than kind of impose a set of special effects on these situations. And I also don't think what we're trying to do is simulate an experience, or we're trying, you know, because I don't think that's possible. You know, none of us know exactly how each of us experiences the world. But what we wanted to do was just to kind of put an audience in a different frame of looking at things. And so we kind of had this method of just trying to observe the spaces we were in a very sensory way, just kind of, you know, forget words for a minute and just imagine what this room feels like. And so to shoot for that kind of thing. And when you do that, sort of, I think kind of emotion comes out of those places and out of, you know, the things people do. So it was very kind of improvisatory. And then I guess we decided, you know, that rather than intercut between all these different people, we would give each of them time so you can kind of immerse yourself with them for a period, you know, and that each person's story in a way would lead and inform the next person's. And Amrit seemed a great place to start because she was a visual artist and she could literally take you into a different way of seeing. So that was really how it started and came about, and pretty much was sort of built in the edit.
Let me take a couple of the moments that Jerry was just talking about and ask the parents. Clara, can I just ask you first here? You know, Jerry mentioned that the way that at least the author of The Reason I Jumped, Naoki, was talking about how he sees the details of a thing. So instead of seeing the big picture, you know, we see a car, he may see the rust on a hubcap and obsess about those details and then view it outward until the whole emerges, and it takes some time to process. Whereas, you know, we may see it differently. How much does that ring true to experience with your daughter? Is there some of that?
Yes, she can obsess on certain things, and so I didn't get an understanding of it, and she could just keep doing something over and over and over again, and then get frustrated, and then that's where, like, I have to figure out how to like stop her stop her from obsessing and change it. And I'll think about how long, and I'll have to tell people who watch her, if she's doing something for too long, you got to stop her. And so, like, now I'm just very proactive, because I've seen how because if she's doing and obsessing on something small or something too long, she'll get too hyped. She'll get very hyper, and then we have to calm her down. So then I just tell people, like, oh, like, I say, how's Jayla doing? And then they'll be like, oh, she's been playing with this toy for like an hour. And I'm like, no, no, it's going to come soon. She's going to get hyped up and then start throwing things. And she's just going to, like, because she gets too into certain things. And so we have to give her breaks. But, like, everybody has to be proactive with her to understand that part. And so I have to have even scripts and papers around to let people know, so they don't forget to certain things about her personality and certain things that she's doing and why she's doing those things. And she's doing one thing to communicate that she needs this other thing, or we need to figure out something else that she wants.
Yeah, and so it's interesting, because when Amrit's mother is talking about that obsession, it sounds to me, Clara, like there's a balance that, you know, you want to recognize
yes,
how your daughter's communicating, respond to needs, but you've also learned that, at least for her, again, just one person, an N of one experience. For her, there becomes too much. There can be too much. But how did you respond in the film when Amrit's mother was saying, I felt like I was trying to stop her from being who she was, and then she broke down?
Yes, and I almost broke down too. That really resonated with me because I had that same epiphany about even giving her time and respecting her, because I was talking to someone this past 10 months. She has been like, I have not been respecting her. I didn't realize I was not respecting her. She was, I would process things in my mind and say, okay, Jayla, it's time to go to the bathroom. It's time to do this. And I would process this all in my mind. But then when it was time, I didn't give her a chance to process it, but I had processed it in my mind. And I had to realize, I'm sorry, I had to realize, and it's been helping, it has changed everything because I've given her the respect. I'm sorry. I've given her the respect and telling her in 10 minutes, we're going to go to the bathroom. And in 10 minutes, we're going to leave, or a couple minutes. And I just keep telling her that. And then she just gets right up and goes. She gets right up and she's happy. And she just gets right up and goes. So it took me a long time to realize that.
Look, please don't apologize for the emotion. I know there's a lot there, but it sounds to me, Clara, like you're really discovering things about your daughter and about what works in terms of the communication, and it's powerful. It's okay. I just want you to.
It's just game changing when I know this works, but then it's just thinking back about like how long it took for me to understand that, because I wasn't respecting her and respecting her time. And now I know that, and we're all doing better, and I'm teaching everyone else that interacts with her, she needs time, and it's been working. So I'm really happy with that. So it's tears of sadness, but then also tears of happiness, because now we're getting it right this time.
I hear you. I'm grateful that you're sharing the story. And let me ask Sarah Milko for the perspective of a parent on that same subject of, I know you're so proud of who Teddy is becoming, and you respect his agency and autonomy. How much did you connect with that moment in the film when Amrit's mother was really sort of tough on herself for saying, I was trying to deny who my daughter was?
Yeah, well, I think, whether I give her a lot of credit for admitting that. I'm not sure I had admitted that in my own mind until I heard her say that. And I thought, wow, how many years did I try to do the same thing, and it's, you want your child to fit in. You want your child to have an easy pathway. You want people to be nice to your child, and I think it takes a while. It's a journey, right? Right, Ted? We're on this together, right? Yeah. But he has taught our family more than we'll ever be able to teach him. That's for sure. And like Clara said, we I'm learning every day, and it's amazing. But it really forces you to stop and slow down and listen. And when you're willing to listen, it's pretty astounding what you're going to hear and what you're going to learn.
I'm going to kick it over to some audience questions in a moment. Jerry, I mean, there's not a whole lot more that needs to be said about the moments we just saw those parents share, but I do think I think the film gives an avenue for those for viewers who don't have children with autism to connect to just the battle of trying to find what your child needs. And I just want to thank you for at least that moment in the film alone will stay with me for a long time. Is there a moment, is that among others that stand out to viewers? I mean, is there something that has moved people the most? You got to unmute for me, Jerry.
I mean, sorry, I thought that was a question to the viewers, not to me. Yeah, I mean, there are these sort of, I think, I don't know, when you're making these kinds of films, you start to think of them quite structurally, you know, and you feel, you know, we haven't played this film very often in a cinema. And of course, it was a film that was really designed for a sort of shared experience. We did the sound in like 360-degree sound, and we've only really played it a couple of times in cinema because launched at Sundance and then got shut down. But definitely, you know, I think the moment Ben says, you know, they deprive my civil rights is a absolutely sort of key kind of moment, I think, where a lot of you know, where a lot of things that have been happening in the film up to that point sort of coalesce into that moment. And as you say, I think Artie's you know, admission, kind of recognition rather, that you know, that maybe she was stopping her daughter from being herself, you know, that's a kind of key moment. I think Jeremy, Joss's dad's moment when he says, you know, what's going to happen when we're not here. You know, there are these sort of key moments through, and I think the moment when Justina leaves the room when her mum's doing this amazing work with communities in Sierra Leone, and someone talks about being her community wanting her to drop her child in the river. Yeah, there were those sort of really hard-hitting moments in it, I think.
An audience question from a viewer for a question for Jerry. What surprised you in making the film, or was there anything that you did not anticipate? I mean, you know, meeting Ben and Emma, meeting all of the, you know, I think there's so many things that you don't anticipate, aren't there? I mean, Amrit's artwork, Ben and Emma's communication, you know, moments of each of the people where you realize that, you know, as Naoki said, you know, not speaking means just because I can't speak doesn't mean I have nothing to say. So I think those are the sort of key surprise moments. Another question from a viewer: did it take a lot of time to get everyone used to having cameras around, and how small was the crew? The crew was really small. It was sort of me, a camera person, and a sound person. We often had the camera assistant, but usually not in the room with us. You know, so they kind of held down a lot, actually. I don't think people, in my experience of making docs, it wasn't, almost wasn't as, people weren't as self-conscious almost, you know, mainly because there's more important things going on than the filming most of the time. So I don't think that it took people a long time. I mean, we kind of, I guess the process of consent in any documentary is about sort of forming a relationship of trust, and in this particularly, you know, knowing, you know, trying to explain to everyone kind of what we're doing, letting people use the camera, look through it, playing things back, stopping when things become too much, all of those things which, you know, one would do in any kind of filmmaking, but in this project more so. Jared, having read some interviews with Naoki Higashida, I want to ask you and all the panelists a little bit about some comments he made, and I want to ask this in a way that doesn't sort of how do I say this? I told you I was going to be clumsy here. I think your film does such an important job in not sort of mystifying or sort of going into mysticalism, or, you know, just sort of creating a false profundity. I think it just creates real stories and gives us a great avenue of understanding, as opposed to trying to overly inflate. And I, a lot of docs, a lot of films, I think, don't pull that off. So I'm really appreciative of that. So what I'm going to say from Naoki is not meant to say, oh, look, you know, he has all the answers. I mean, we all have different thoughts about life, but he said something that was interesting when he was asked about, you know, how he has come to view the differences in communication and just the thought processes of, for example, himself and people who are neurotypical. And one of the things he said was, people who are neurotypical obsess on competition. You compare yourselves to others. You ask, how much money is someone else making? What is my social status? It is constant comparison to others And that did strike me as really profound because so much of our daily existence is really built upon those. I mean, if we really boil it down, there's a lot of that. And I wonder if you find, some wisdom in that yourself, and that that the more we really try to open ourselves to interaction with people from all different experiences, the less we are sort of obsessed with our own, where we are in the race and where we are in the rank and where we are in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, I think Naoki, as well as being someone that's managed to translate this kind of his own sort of internal experience into words through this sort of incredible kind of act of I don't know, determination. He's also a really acute observer of the neurotypical world, I think. And that idea that autistic people don't have a theory of mind, it feels to me is completely blown away by that book, because he's constantly thinking, like, why do you do that strange thing? Why do you? And so I think the book, isn't only about autism; it's also about neurotypicality, and there are, certainly sort of observations that this 12-year-old makes about the neurotypical world that are pretty acute, I think.
Yeah, indeed. I'll go to Clara and Sarah next, and if Teddy wants to weigh in as well on the question of frankly, if he is, pretty comfortable in his own skin now. I mean, Naoki says he used to think that if he had the choice, he would not be autistic, but now he says he would not make that choice. He is very much comfortable with how he communicates with the world and who he is. And I found that really comforting. Claire, what do you think about Naoki saying that, a lot of folks get a little obsessed with competition as opposed to just finding their own beauty?
I think that's awesome that he said that. Our children are so special, and I know I could look at my daughter and she's so special, and she has changed the world already, I believe, in getting an understanding, and I'll continue to fight for her to be included. And because what's going to happen with this world, as long as everybody doesn't see these type of behaviors, it's going to look odd. I know when I was in school, it looked odd. It looked odd when we saw children, because they secluded everybody over in a corner. And if they get our kids out, and so all these different behaviors will not be a non-issue. I feel like it's going to even change this world to make just this world a much better place if we continue doing what we're doing, and the parents and the caregivers continue to fight for their children, and the children, the people with autism could do the same thing in whatever way they need to.
Yeah, it'll help if this film becomes mandatory viewing in classrooms. I would love it.
Yes.
Sarah Milko, do you want to weigh in on some of that before we go to Teddy?
Sure. I mean, Clara hit the nail on the head. I mean, we're making progress slowly but surely. We're I think as parents and a community, we're really working hard to. It's a paradigm shift. I say that all the time. I mean, the way we treat individuals with disabilities now is light years ahead of where we were, even 20 years ago. But that's not to say that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, right? How do you feel about it? What do you want to say?
Yes, I feel good about myself.
Yeah, he said he feels good about himself. You wouldn't change, would you? Yeah, and we wouldn't change it either, Ted, right?
Teddy, I appreciate that, Teddy, and hearing that I think is really restoring for, frankly, for a world that for a long time, as Sarah, as you and I've talked about, worked really hard to change people to fit what society said was things were supposed to look like or sound. So right. I'm grateful for Teddy's thoughts there. I'd love Jerry to share some final thoughts. And often we ask filmmakers, if their film is kind of landing with the audience the way they hope. I don't know, if I had 98% on Rotten Tomatoes and all the reviews you did and all the accolades and all the love, I think I'd feel pretty good as a filmmaker. But this is not just making a film to, this is a different kind of film. This is a film that's important. This is a film that may may actually change the world in a I'm trying not to be too grandiose, but it may, Jerry. I mean, I think it sort of already is. So I'll open the floor for you for some final thoughts here.
I hope it. I mean, I hope that it maybe results in just some really practical changes. You know, I think that the moment you sort of see Ben and Emma, the potential for Ben and Emma to live independently, you know, the moment you see what they can do once they're given the chance to have an education that's kind of worthy of their intelligence. You know, I think those things point to a whole kind of set of possibilities that it's up to us to kind of make possible. And you know, so I hope the film in some small way just kind of pushes that forward a bit.
Well, let me bring in Beth Ciardi now, and we'll thank our panelists in just a moment, but I know Beth wants to make a few remarks. She's the director of the Golisano Autism Center. Hi, Beth.
Hi, Evan. Thanks so much, you know, for creating a safe and comforting and accepting space for the sensitive subject here tonight. You know, along with WXXI for hosting the platform to bring awareness to those living with autism who are unable to speak words using their physical voice. I'm grateful to participating partners, the Golisano Foundation and its confidence in imagining the possibilities for our community, and El Sigo for supporting the important message of The Reason I Jump. And especially also want to say thank you to the Little for featuring the film for our community. A lot of emotion here tonight. You know, I have to say to my friends, Sarah, Teddy, and Clara tonight that, you know, I'm so inspired by their courage and for sharing their perspective, you know, Teddy especially. Sarah and Clara's passionate advocacy and obviously the love for their children and all that they do, you know, for their families and community, demonstrating that. Especially to you, Jerry, for really beautifully introducing us to the essence, I think, of what life is like for some who just communicate differently. It's important, I think, to understand that not being able to speak does not mean not having anything to say, which our friends in the film clearly express, along with Jerry's gift in filmmaking. So, you know, we see the speech and language deficits and the disorders, you know, not just portrayed in the movie, but what we're learning out in the community and folks that we come in contact with every day, that, you know, the apraxia of speech, you know, really is, you know, the issues with forming the sentence and getting it out, but it doesn't mean that the desire and the capacity aren't present. It's just that, you know, the person just can't execute the act of it. So, you know, having access to the tools and the therapeutic services that support people of all ages who require an alternate way of speaking, whether it be via assistive technology with an iPad or using the letterboard, you know, like we had seen in the movie, in addition to the way Teddy is talking to us here tonight, I think is very critical. You know, especially that accessibility piece, and Clara had talked to that about Jayla's experience and thinking that, you know, if she had access to those tools, she earlier on, or maybe more of that in her daily living, that she may be further along in her journey as well. So, you know, we're seeing that most of these tools, you know, throughout the lifespan are pretty much interchangeable. And I always look at them as another type of language, just like, you know, the mainstream would consider American Sign Language. You know, so really once, you know, folks have the necessary communication tools, you know, the community needs to have the opportunities, the social, recreation, and vocational opportunities with the proper supports in place, as we have at the Golisano Autism Center. Our provider partners, along with the community, you know, will continue to shed a light on, you know, the diversities of autism, especially what we're seeing here tonight. And, you know, being a part of educating the community of the importance of, you know, really getting to know someone with autism and providing opportunities for them to, you know, be successful, whatever that may be and mean for fulfilling lives.
Thank you, Beth. Amrit in the film, as Beth mentions, doesn't communicate through speech, but certainly communicates through her art. And as we get ready to close, I just want to mention that I had Sarah and Teddy's permission if I felt like it was right to read it. Teddy wrote a beautiful poem, and this is just another example of the different forms of expression. I mean, some people pour their expression into art, and Amrit did in the movie. Teddy wrote this poem in 2019. It's called Sleep. When sleep covers my eyes and dreams flow in my mind, I am a boat that rocks in the middle of time. It's beautiful, Ted. I'm grateful for that. Thanks for letting me share that. It's a great little coda on a wonderful evening. So a couple of points here. If you're watching along on Facebook, in the comments section, we've got a survey. We'd love for you to take that. We want to know how we can continue to engage and work with this community. And it's possible because of our wonderful, wonderful partners, the Al Siegel community of agencies, the Golisano Foundation, the Golisano Autism Center, Autism Up, the Little Theater, and of course, if you want to share this film, share it. Share it now. The Little has made it so accessible. I always think you should buy art if you can buy art, but The Little has made this accessible with code. So share it. Let people see it. It's going to end up in your kids' classrooms because it should, but really share, share, share. Thank you to everyone here. Jerry Rothwell, I have no idea what time it is wherever you are, but whatever it is, you've stayed up with us. We are grateful for your film and your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks for the conversation. Thanks for everyone's contributions. They're all really striking.
Clara Washington, thank you, Clara. To you and your family, much love. You shared some beautiful stuff about your family tonight. All the love for the future, and thanks for being with us, Clara.
Thank you.
Sarah and Teddy Milko, thank you for being with us, and I know we will catch up with you soon. Thank you for the work you're doing, Sarah. Teddy, thank you for sharing your perspective with us tonight.
Thank you.
Tom O'Connor and everyone else at Al Siegel, thanks for watching from the Little Theater Film Society, WXXI. Good night.